All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. So, the end of a horrible season for the New York Giants came about 5 weeks ago. And unfortunately, for the Giants, there was some more misfortune added to their misery as they just had to sit back and watch their arch rivals in the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl for the second time in less than a decade. And to make matters even worse than that, the Eagles just did it with former Giants running back Saquon Barkley on their roster as a centerpiece of their offense. Now, this was already going to be a very interesting offseason for the Giants. As you know, we know team co-owner John Mara has already put general manager Joe Shane and Brian Dayball on notice that it's indeed going to be put up or shut up time here in 2025. But if you're reading the tea leaves around the Giants so far this season, one or for this offseason rather, one really needs to sit back and ask themselves, is there really truly a plan for success for this team going forward? We're hearing about the rumors of the Giants possibly going after veteran quarterback Matthew Stafford. And in my opinion, okay, if this is true, I feel like the Giants should stay as far away from Stafford for multiple reasons. Now, yes, Stafford's arrival would give the Giants some leadership in the locker room, especially from the quarterback position. And this is something that New York has not had in quite some time. But let's be realistic. Stafford, first and foremost, is 37 years of age. How much more does he have left in the tank? Some other things for me with Matt Stafford are this: he has played his entire career as a starter indoors, first with the Detroit Lions and then with the Los Angeles Rams. Now you're asking him to come to the cold of the Northeast in November, December, and possibly January to have success. We're talking about a guy in Stafford who is not the most mobile quarterback throughout his career. The Giants have had offensive line issues for far too long. And now you're talking about bringing a guy like Stafford into that mix. Hypothetically speaking, if you're the Giants, what would you want to give up to bring in a Matthew Stafford? Okay, because New York is going into the upcoming draft in possession of the third overall pick in the draft. And just to put it out there, this screams to me because first and foremost, there's a big part of the Giants fan base that really doesn't remember, is not old enough to remember how bad this team was during the 70s. I'll say this screams of the mid 1970s because you go back for this team, the Giants, that is 1975, 50 years ago, when they gave up the second overall pick in that draft to acquire veteran quarterback Craig Morton from the Dallas Cowboys. And of course, it was pathetic with Morton with the Giants. And what did Dallas do with that second overall pick? They just turned around and drafted Randy White. And I'll leave it there because the rest is history. If you are the Giants, it's one of those, yes, you do have issues at the quarterback position. But at the end of the day, the Giants are not a Matthew Stafford away from competing. TFX, my man, how you doing? And you know what? You and I talked last week, and just changing gears real quick. That was a good old fashioned tail kicking, okay, that we saw in Super Bowl number 59. The only thing that the Philadelphia Eagles needed was a bucket of mop and glow for the way that they waxed the Kansas City Chiefs. But nonetheless, you were saying it's the wrong move. Shane will do it. Absolutely. Because I'm looking at it like this. I mean, you're talking about Stafford. He's had injury issues in the past. I totally get it. Passing yardage wise, he threw for more yards last season than the entire Giants team. So at least you have that aspect of it. Brian Dayball is not Sean McVay. Okay, that's another thing. to keep an eye on right there. But to me, at the end of the day, it comes back to what we talked about earlier this offseason. Once the announcement was made that John Mara was going to be bringing back Joe Shane and Brian Dayball, and basically with this put up or shut up mantra here in 2025, you have a duo that is desperate. And at the end of the day, desperate men tend to do desperate things. And it's one of those, the Giants bringing in Matthew Stafford screams of desperation. This goes back to what I've been saying. The bottom line is this: Joe Shane and Brian Dayball have been with the Giants since 2021. Okay, that was the time for the Giants, Shane and Dayball, to go out there and find their quarterback. Typically, when you see a new head coach and a new general manager come into an organization, they typically get their guy at quarterback right away, not try to go out there and fix a guy who is unfixable and Daniel Jones. And they kept him around for 3 years. They paid him when they needed to pay Saquon Barkley. And guess what? They're paying for it dearly in more ways than one. You just went 4-13. You're picking third in April's draft. Saquon went to your biggest rival and just won the Super Bowl. Let's not forget that man just ran for more than 2,000 yards and could have broken the single season rushing record against the Giants in week number 18 if he had indeed played. But nonetheless, the Giants right now are screaming of desperation. And I continue to say this: New York needs to go out there and draft a quarterback and develop one. And this, again, I think falls into the lap of Joe Shane. Six quarterbacks were taken in round one last year. Okay, we know that the Giants weren't going to get the Caleb Williams. We know that they weren't going to get the Jaden Daniels. We know that they weren't going to get the Drake May. Yes, you still had JJ McCarthy out there. We don't know what JJ McCarthy's going to be. Okay, he tore up his knee last year in the preseason. But we did get a glimpse of Michael Penix, and we also saw what Bo Nix did for the Denver Broncos. My point is this, and just like I said last year, drafting Malik Neighbors in the first round is nice if you have a quarterback to get him the football. Daniel Jones was not going to be able to get Malik Neighbors the football. All of us knew it except for Joe Shane. Okay, at the end of the day, also, Joe Shane and the Giants really should have sat back and looked at this year's quarterback class. And I think that should have triggered them a little bit more to go out there and have gotten their quarterback last year. Why? Because if you had gone out there, if you were the Giants and you had gotten your quarterback last year, then you can come back now and get yourself a wide receiver. No disrespect to Malik Neighbors, phenomenal athlete. But at the end of the day, what is the purpose of having a guy like that at wide receiver if you can't find somebody to throw him the football? A prime example of that, the Los Angeles Rams, much better run franchise than the Giants are right now. And you look at two of their biggest and best receivers in recent years. Cooper Kupp was not a first round pick, and the same thing can be said for Puka Nakua. It's all about drafting, it's all about scouting, and it's all about developing your talent. And it's easier to find that guy at wide receiver later that you can develop instead of your quarterback. So I'll tell you like this: I'm just throwing it out there. If the Giants truly do go in this direction to say, hey, we're going to go out there and get a Matthew Stafford, whatever draft compensation that they give up to the Rams, I guarantee you the Rams are going to flip that around and find themselves some talent, and they're going to be able to keep the machinery going. There's a reason why we consistently see the same teams picking early in the NFL draft. And there's a reason why we consistently see the same teams picking late in the NFL draft. The teams that are consistently picking early don't know what they're doing. And the teams who are consistently picking late in each round of the NFL draft, guess what? They're finding the guys, especially in rounds 1 and 2, that should have gone earlier, and they are falling to them in their respective laps. And I think this is another situation that could be brewing right here for the Giants and the Rams. Like I said, New York is not a quarterback away. Okay. That doesn't mean that they don't need to go out there and get one. Okay, they're picking third. Would a Shador Sanders be there? Would a Cam Ward be there? I mean, you're hearing like people who are fans, okay, that are not warm to the idea of bringing in a Shador Sanders or a Cam Ward. I'll tell you like this though: if you're the Giants, you might not have a choice because you've got to look around the quarterback room in the National Football League, and the good quarterbacks you're not really going to go out there and get. Are the Giants really going to go out there and take a look at Russell Wilson at this point in his career, on Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford? I'll tell you like this: from the Giants' standpoint, I think that they should really sit back and look at what happened to their co-tenants at MetLife Stadium. They went out there and felt like they were a veteran quarterback away. And what did they get in 2 years with Aaron Rodgers? Absolutely nothing. We all remember how electric that MetLife Stadium was on opening night back in 2023, and it turned into a funeral very quickly. Okay, so to me, it's just one of those things. I just cannot warm myself up to the Giants going out there and going veteran with the quick plug and patch. I just simply don't see it. TFX, you're also saying they are in a spiral. Do I think Kayvon Thibodeau was a good pick? I think he was. I truly do. I just look at it like this. Kayvon just went to his second different system in the last couple of years. Of course, he was brought in under Wink Martindale. They switched it up to Shane Bowen. Okay, they did bring in Brian Burns. Okay, and the Giants were getting pressures, but I think what hurt Kayvon Thibodeau last year was the injury because he was starting to get into that rhythm, and that was a big thing because the Giants on that D line, especially, they weren't healthy. Brian Burns was playing through an injury. Dexter Lawrence was playing through an injury. Kayvon Thibodeau was playing through an injury, and those injuries occurred early. And I think it took away from them. I really want to see what this Giants defense, especially the front, can look like after getting another season to work with Shane Bowen. And I think playing devil's advocate here, I think that was one of the reasons why John Mara decided to bring everybody back because just for the sake of argument, if you let go of Joe Shane, you might as well let go of Brian Dayball. And of course, most of those coaches that were on that staff are not going to be retained for the following season. So I think John Mara wants to see a little bit of consistency. I think Kayvon Thibodeau does have an opportunity to have more of an impact this season, in my opinion. Of course, let's see what else the Giants do in free agency as well as the draft. But, there are some people out there who are saying with the third pick, they're saying the Giants should take an Abdul Carter. They're saying the Giants should take a Travis Hunter. Both of those immense talents they could be too good for the Giants to pass up on. But my other problem is if you take an Abdul Carter, what about the quarterback position? And of course, for those out there who might not want the Giants to take a Cam Ward, for those out there who might not want the Giants to take a Shador Sanders, one of the other top quarterbacks in the draft that a lot of people are warming up to, Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. Coming into this offseason, he was looked at as a second round pick. I guarantee you he won't be there when the Giants pick in the second round. He's a guy, honestly, if Jackson Dart last past the teens in the first round of the draft, I will be surprised because you got a lot of teams out there that are desperate to get their hands on a quarterback. And like I always say, desperate men do desperate things. So the bottom line is they might need to address that quarterback situation early in the draft. And if they do go that route, clearly there's not going to be a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter there. But at the end of the day, and I keep saying this, for the Giants, this is an uphill battle in the NFC East. We know, regardless of the Eagles just winning the Super Bowl, they are and they continue to be the class of this division. Why? Because they draft and they develop their talent. Howie Roseman knows how to bring in the right people in free agency, and he also is putting on a master class in regards to managing that cap. So the Giants are nowhere near being in the same conversation with the Eagles right now. In years past, it was the Giants and Washington Commanders alternating for the basement in the NFC East. And it looks like finally Washington has figured it out with quarterback Jaden Daniels. Now, of course, let's see if Jaden can avoid that dreaded sophomore slump. But nonetheless, to me, I still think that they are ahead of the curve with the Giants. And for all of the issues and for all of the ups and downs and the problems that the Dallas Cowboys have, they themselves are still better than the Giants. And to your point, TFX, the Giants just went 0-6 in that division. And then at the end of the day, it wasn't even close. Okay, so that just shows you where the gap is. And of course, one of the biggest reasons for that, and I said it going into last season, the Giants had the worst quarterback room in that division. And without even playing one snap in the NFL, I put Jaden Daniels last year ahead of Daniel Jones at quarterback. And that's going to be the biggest thing for the Giants. They have to close, and if they're going to close that gap on those other teams in that division, they first have to close the gap in the quarterback room. Can they go out there and get somebody who's going to win games for them and not lose games? You got to go back to I think 2018, okay, to find the last time that the Giants, passing wise, were on the top half of passing yardage per game in the National Football League. In recent years, it's not even that they've been on the bottom half. It's like the low 20s and 30 or 31 or 32. And that's not going to get you that far in this current National Football League. You need to have a guy that can go out there and win games for you at the quarterback position. And this is something that the Giants have lacked since the days of one Eli Manning. You look at it like this: what can or will the Giants be able to do in order to become respectable? Plain and simple, they need a quarterback. Yes, listen, I'm totally on board for that. But the bottom line is, and this is why some people wanted John Mara to move off of Joe Shane and Brian Dayball, because they could do something very desperate right now. And I'll tell you like this, TFX, you know about this. You go back to last season, we had the flyovers with the planes, we had an empty MetLife Stadium in the month of December, and honestly, for a portion of November. If you are John Mara, how are you going to sell your fan base to go out there and shell out money to come support this team next season if these guys muck it up at the quarterback position once more? That is the bottom line. And these are legit conversations that the Giants brain trust, if you will, needs to have right now. Should the Eagles win, light a fire under this organization? I would think so, because we heard about and we saw the Hard Knocks podcast, which was a or TV show rather, which was a train wreck from the word go, and then honestly, in my opinion, an embarrassment for the Giants organization last year. It's your division rival, and honestly, the Eagles right now are everything that the Giants need to be. Okay, and then of course, we know about the whole thing. Once the Eagles won the Super Bowl, Michael Strahan, Giants legend, flying the Eagles flag, this, that, and the third. If you're the Giants, you should be embarrassed by what you have put out there, the product that you have put out there for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years or so, each and every Sunday, because at the end of the day, it simply ain't good. Like I said, this is going to be an interesting off season for New York. It all comes down to the quarterback position. That is the biggest thing. If the Giants don't get that right, I guarantee you this is going to be it for Joe Shane and Brian Dayball. In my opinion, I'd go young. I'd finally draft and try to develop a quarterback. Hopefully, that development could come sooner rather than later. But guess what? It's easy for me to sit back and say it right here because my job ain't on the line. And I ain't working in the front office for the Giants. I'm not the GM and I'm not the head coach. But to your point, TFX, it just smells of them doing something stupid. So at the end of the day, the Giants have been a bad organization for quite some time. And what you're seeing right now, like I said, is going back to the days of the 70s. And what got them out of that funk was, the Pisarcik fumble in 1978. The GM Andy Robustelli got fired. From there, the Maras basically went to Pete Rozelle in the front office and asked for help. And then they brought in George Young to run the front office. George Young, of course, was the buffer between Wellington Mara and Tim Mara, as the two Maras, uh, uncle and nephew, were not getting along at that point, and the Giants were able to get it turned around. It's getting close to that point. For the folks in New York, in the New York area that are diehard sports fans, what I'm seeing of the Giants right now is reminiscent of the Isaiah Thomas New York Knicks of to mid to late 2000s. And of course, you know, the Knicks at that point hit rock bottom when fans, showed up in front of Madison Square Garden protesting, and they had a giant pink slip wanting James Dolan to fire Isaiah Thomas. And eventually, the Knicks got their act together. Giant fans don't want to hear about that. I know they won a couple of championships with Eli Manning in 2007 and 2011. But you know what? The more you talk about it, and as the losses continue to add up for this team, they're getting further and further away from that. Believe it or not, it's almost 20 years since that David Tyree catch. Seems like yesterday, but it's not. And of course, all of those great runs with the Eli Giants, those are becoming distant memories. Okay, and of course, the Giant fans, they want some new memories to be that they can enjoy. And of course, it's ups and downs, it's ebbs and flows to every sports franchise. And right now, the Giants are simply down on their luck, but they have got to find a way to get ahead of that, especially just to find a way to compete in this division alone. And this is why it is so important for them to fix their quarterback position. Like I said before, they are not a Matthew Stafford away. Okay. You put Matthew Stafford on this team, I'm not thinking about the Giants as far as being a playoff team next year. Okay. It's that plain and simple. They've got to think for the long haul, but at the same time, you got guys that might not be there for the long haul, and Joe Shane and Brian Dayball. So let's just see how the Giants attack this offseason as far as addressing their quarterback situation. I don't think New York will the Giant fan base will welcome Matthew Stafford with open arms. I darn sure don't think that the New York fans, the Giant fans, at least in my opinion, want any part of Stafford's outspoken wife Kelly with her podcast and everything like that. The New York media would eat that up, okay? Because it sounds like the Rams are getting tired of that whole sideshow as well. And another thing for me, with a team like the Rams, who just won a championship with Stafford at quarterback several years ago, when they're ready to get off of a guy like that, I think that's a red flag. And I think there has to be more than meets the eye. You look at the Packers, they were more than happy to unload Aaron Rodgers on the Jets. And of course, they got those picks and they've turned those picks into something. And what did the Jets have to show for it? Not a doggone thing. Okay. So if you're the Giants, that should be another example of plain and simple buyer beware. But like P.T. Barnum said, a sucker's born every minute or every day, whatever the statement is. And maybe the Rams could be like setting up the Giants to pull a con job on them right now. TFX, you're saying those 2007 Giants were unbeatable. They beat the Cowboy team and the Patriots. Yeah, because Tom Coughlin, who was the head coach of that team, knew what it took to win with the Giants organization. His words were he came there to restore giant pride. And of course, they had themselves a darn good GM and Ernie Accorsi. He had retired in 2006. And then, of course, he made way for Jerry Reese. But of course, Accorsi put that team together, had a long history of drafting and developing teams going back to his days with the Cleveland Browns, working there with Marty Schottenheimer in the 1980s. But nonetheless, the Giants have to get in front of this. They've got to change the culture. They have got to find a way to win, and they need the right guy at quarterback. And like I said, Matthew Stafford ain't it. That's just my personal opinion on it. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you like what you saw and heard on this podcast, please feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. TFX, I got no picks to give you tomorrow night. I got no picks to give you this weekend, man. And I got no picks to give you for about the next 6.5 to 7 months. But I will say this. If you want to see a comedy of errors, in my opinion, this weekend, definitely go out there and check out that NBA All-Star game or whatever they're calling it right now, because it is an absolute joke, in my opinion. But nonetheless, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365 that you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.